right. Hello, this is Mr. Ippolito, and we are beginning our 7th grade World History Medieval Europe Unit Exam Review podcast. So, for those of you just joining us, and I am just waiting because I have my computer here in front of me, and then I can see myself over here on my phone. Okay, so it looks like we are now on and we are live. So that's wonderful. Hey, okay, so for those of you joining us, here's the way it's going to work. I have the review in front of me. So I have all the resources that you have. I have mrippolito.com in front of me. I have all of the handouts that we've done in class, all the assignments, all the reading assignments that we've done. So before we go any further, let me just remind you of this, which is what I try to say as often as I can, which is we're going to have an hour together. My goal is to answer as many of your questions that are pressing on your mind as possible. We may not get to every topic in the next hour. I just did this same kind of review last night or 2 nights ago, actually, with my 8th graders because they just took an exam today and we weren't able to get through everything. So what I'm going to tell you in advance, and I might remind you of this at the end, is the best way to study is to go through your notes, right? Go through your notes, go through your notes, go through your notes. Your homework, in-class notes, all the stuff that we've been learning in class, there's no substitute for that. The next best thing is to look at all of the textbook readings that I assigned to you. So if you take a look at, and I'm going to go here, and let me see if I can share my screen with you here. I'll do screen share. And then I'm going to go here to mrippolito.com. And if you take a look right here, you'll see I have pointed out in the table of contents, this is exactly what we've read. Now, I'm going to tell you right now that chapter 12, section 3 and chapter 12, section 4, that is from our medieval Japan unit. I am not testing you at all on medieval Japan. This is entirely on medieval Europe. So pretty much we're going to start right here. Let's go ahead and just say we're going to start at item number 7. Chapter 14, section 1, reading and notes. So this is all the stuff that I'm holding you responsible for right here is from item 7 all the way down to item 19. So if you're saying, because I've had this question asked, Mr. Ippolito, what do I read from the textbook? Well, again, first thing you should do is go over your notes in class and homework notes. Next thing, reread, go over review 14.1, 14.2, 14.3, and then 15.1 and 15.2. Now, please also notice that in the Medieval Europe Chapter 15 wrap-up, I do ask some additional questions. Even though I didn't ask you to read 15.3 or 15.4, I did ask some questions from later sections in Chapter 15. But really, for the rest of Chapter 15, I would just go ahead and I would advise that you look at the questions that are on the Medieval Europe Chapter 15 wrap-up. Okay, so now that I've just kind of given you the guide as to like how best to study this evening, we'll go ahead and I'll go ahead and get started. So first of all, just going to give some quick shout outs to those of you who have already commented. So Ethan, you've been hanging out for a while. So Ethan, welcome. Also going to give a shout out to Eric, Nathan, Ava, Caitlin, Ben, Ava, and okay, I think that's everybody there. So I'm going to go ahead and start. I'm going to get to your questions. First of all, Eric asks, Mr. Ippolito, when are you going to grade our 14.2 quiz? If I still haven't, then remind me tomorrow in class, and I'll make sure that I know exactly which ones you're talking about. Those are the written ones. Yes, I still need to grade those, and I will do that soon. But remind me again when I see you in class tomorrow. Okay, so let's go ahead and here's my plan. Is you probably have questions. Those of you who are on the live chat, I see you. There are at least 10 people who are on the live chat right now. And so you should ask me what is foremost on your mind. Ask me about a vocabulary word, or ask me about one of the review questions, or ask me about the Medieval Europe Chapter 15 wrap-up. Let me go ahead and I'm going to turn back here so that I'm going to stop screen sharing so you can see my face again. There we go. I'm back. So yeah, so what I think that you should do is I think that you should ask me questions, because that's how I know what is foremost on your mind. Otherwise, I'm just going to start talking about the review, and I may be talking about things that you already know about, and I would rather focus my time on helping you on specifically what is on your mind. So that's the way it works. And I'll give a shout out to Iman and Diego, who have just joined us. Okay, so Iman has asked the first history question, so I'm going to go ahead and start off with that first. Iman says, question number 10 on the study guide. So question number 10 on the study guide. How did Vikings influence the development of medieval Europe? Iman, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked. So here's what I'm looking for. And by the way, if you see that I'm kind of looking down and taking notes, it's because here's what I'm going to try to do. I'm going to check every time you ask for something and every time I talk about something in the review. I'm just going to make a note, and I'm going to make sure that if we talked about it, that I'm going to give it at least a shout out, 1 or 2 questions on the exam tomorrow. So you felt like this exam review was worthwhile, even if you're watching it live or if you end up watching it later. If you watch it tomorrow morning, you watch it during homeroom tomorrow, you watch it during brunch tomorrow, whatever the case may be. So let me tell you this. Medieval Europe was a dangerous place. It was a scary place, and it was made especially scary by the Vikings. The Vikings, as you saw, we played Viking Quest. We watched the video on the Vikings. We watched, I think, maybe a brain pop on the Vikings. There was a lot of information that we learned about the Vikings. Plus, there was a little bit of a mention in the textbook, but really it was kind of more separate learning that we did on the Vikings. Here's why the Vikings were so scary, because you never knew when you were going to be under attack. If you were a monastery on the coast of England, for example, or the coast of France, northern France, you never knew when you might be under attack. But it wasn't just monasteries that were vulnerable. It was regular villages, regular ordinary people who were vulnerable to Viking attack, or in a larger sense, vulnerable to like barbarian attack. These Germanic tribes that were not settled, that were not necessarily civilized in the way that those lands that were settled by the former Roman Empire might have been considered civilized, right? So you have to understand that going back in time, under the Roman Empire, if you lived in Britain or you lived in France or you lived in Italy or Spain, you were under the protection and the laws of the Roman Empire. And then after the Roman Empire collapsed, there was nothing. There was chaos, and there was no central organized system of protection for either for large landowners or for individual landowners, or just even for your average ordinary citizen of Europe. So what would happen is these people, of course, regular ordinary, villagers, farmers, were terrified that they could be attacked at any time. But the people who had more influence were landowners, people with property, because they didn't want their property taken away. They didn't want their property seized. So here's how you protect yourself from that happening. You start to organize. This is how feudalism developed. Feudalism developed because of the Vikings. I need protection. I can't protect myself and my land if I'm a lord. Let's say I own 10,000 acres or 100,000 acres. I can't protect it all by myself. But if I join together with another lord, a fellow neighboring landowner, and with the other neighboring landowner over here, and together we band together, and the people that we have who are of fighting age, we're going to go ahead and give them some status. We're going to call them knights. And then we're going to have one leader. We're going to have one, instead of calling them like a chieftain or a tribal leader, we're going to have one leader called a king. And that king is going to be the lord over all of the lords. And that king, whenever the kingdom is threatened, that king is going to summon the knights from that lord and that lord and that lord, that landowner, and me as a landowner. And collectively, we can provide security for the entire kingdom. That's what feudalism is all about. It's about protection. It's about giving land for protection, right? So the king is going to grant land because they start to believe in this system of, oh my gosh, why am I drawing a blank? The belief that you get your authority from God. That is divine right of kings. I'm sorry, I lost that for a moment. Divine right of kings. You're going to learn about that again in 8th grade U.S. history. They believe, because these are Christian kingdoms now, that king is ordained by God to have that power. So the king has the power and the authority over the kingdom. The king grants land and grants protection to the lords and nobles that are beneath him. And in exchange, they provide service, they provide loyalty or fealty, and they provide knights military service when required for the kingdom. So if number 10 asks, how did Vikings connect to medieval Europe? That's why. That's why they're significant. It's because it's the Viking attacks are the reason why feudalism begins to begin with. Okay, so Iman, that was a great question, and we're now going to move on to the next. Okay, Diego asked. Eric asked, are there going to be bonus questions on the test? And the answer is, I'm not sure, but you know what? I'm going to write down the word bonus and I will consider it. Maybe. Catherine asks, and by the way, I'll give a shout out to Connor. Hello, Connor. Catherine asks, will there be any questions with spelling? I don't think I ever have offered questions about spelling. So I don't think I'm going to start asking questions about spelling now. So, Catherine, I think you're off the hook with regard to spelling. Diego asks a great question. This is a vocabulary question. What does the word peninsula mean? Peninsula is a piece of land that is surrounded on three sides by water. So if you take a look at Florida, Florida is a peninsula. If you take a look at Baja California, that is a peninsula. The peninsula that you learned about when we were, and let me go back to screen sharing here. The peninsula that you learned about, I'm just going to go ahead and, oh, that's not how you spell it. The Iberian Peninsula. This is when we first, I don't know if it was 14.1, 15.1, I'm not quite sure. But when we were learning about European geography, this is the Iberian Peninsula. This is one example of a peninsula. And the picture is not very big, but okay, that's a little bit better. So you get an idea of what a peninsula is. So a peninsula is this, like, for example, the Iberian Peninsula is where Spain and Portugal are located. And so it's a piece of land surrounded on three sides by water. A better example of a peninsula would be the boot, the Italian boot. That is another example of a peninsula. So peninsula is strictly a geographical term, and it simply means a piece of land surrounded on three sides by water. So that was just a straight up geography question. Okay, Catherine, you say the words land for loyalty. And so I'm not quite sure, is that, now I have to check to see, land for loyalty, is that a vocabulary term, land for loyalty? I'm not sure what you mean by land for loyalty, but I will tell you this. Land for loyalty is feudalism, right? That's what we just talked about. Land for loyalty is, I am the king, I give you land if you are my, you're my nobles, my lords, and you in turn give me loyalty and give me military service when I need it. You send the knights when I need them. By the same token, if you are a lord, then you want the loyalty of the people below you, the knights that are below you. They offer you loyalty in exchange for land. And if you are a knight, then your peasants and your serfs that live on your land, or even if you're not a knight, just a vassal, like you're a non-fighting vassal, you're going to have people above you and below you, right, in the system of feudalism. So that's what I mean by land for loyalty. Okay, let's see next. Let's see. Okay, I think there we go. I think I was having a little trouble, at least on my end. It looked like I was having a little trouble with that camera. And I don't know if this is any better, but we'll go ahead and I've switched cameras now. So, all right, next question. Ethan, says, Mr. Ippolito, why did the Europeans have so many crusades? Just straight up basic answer. The reason why there were so many crusades is because the Muslims who were there in the Holy Land kept taking back the land. So I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not asking a whole lot of detailed questions on the Crusades, but here's what I need for you to know about the Crusades. I need you to know that it was a religious war. It was a war for religious reasons, because there were two different religions that believed that this is the Holy Land. This is Jerusalem, and it is holy, and the area around Jerusalem, it is holy to both Muslims and to Christians. I went through all the details in class just the other day, so I'm not going to rehash those. But it meant a lot to both of these faiths. And so because of that, it becomes very precious. And so if the Muslims believe, well, this is a very holy land to us, that there aren't a whole lot of Christians here. And so we're just going to go ahead and I'm simplifying it, they're going to take over control of this land, the land in and around Jerusalem. The Pope, who is the leader of Christendom, the leader of the Catholic Church. And by the way, let me point out that at this time, with the exception of the Eastern Orthodox Church, which we haven't learned a whole lot about, that's centered at Constantinople, and Greeks, Russians, other people living in kind of Eastern Europe belong to the Eastern Orthodox Church. Right now, we're mostly learning about the Roman Catholic Church. That's what we're talking about right now. Everybody in Western Europe is, if you're a Christian, then you belong to the Catholic Church. Later on, when we study the Protestant Reformation, we're going to learn about all the different churches that break off. So today, all those Christian denominations that you might find if you're rolling through Santa Clarita and you see there's a Lutheran church and a Baptist church and a Presbyterian church and an Episcopal church and all these different Christian churches, that's going to happen later on. That's going to start in the 1500s. In the Middle Ages, from the year 500 all the way to the 1500s, there's one in Western Europe. There's one form of Christianity, and that is the Roman Catholic Church. So the Pope has a lot of power at this time. And so if the Pope says, hey, we need to go fight for Christendom, we need to fight for our faith, and that's why you have these soldiers who are going in, with shields on their arms that have crosses on them. You have that phrase, and I put that phrase on your review. Here's the phrase. The phrase is "in hoc signo vinces," which loosely translated means victory through God. And I am going to, let me go back. I'm going to do a little screen share here so I can show you exactly what this means. In hoc signo vinces is Latin for "in this sign thou shalt conquer." Well, what is the sign? It's the sign of God. Under the sign of the cross, you will conquer. In other words, Christians believed that this was their mission from God to go out and conquer the Holy Land. And because Christendom and Christianity is so strong, it is so powerful at this time, whatever the Pope says, all of Western Europe is going to believe. Everyone in England, everyone in Spain and France and Italy and Portugal, if you are a follower, Switzerland, or the countries, the areas that today are Switzerland and Germany, and they're all Catholics, because that's the one form of Christianity. And so if the Pope, as the head of the Roman Catholic Church, says, we got to go fight for this land, for the Holy Land, then that's what you do. So I think, I hope that I answered your question, Ethan, and I'm going to move on now to Catherine. Catherine says, will the origins of the English language factor into the test? You can bet, Catherine, that the origins of the English language, because we spent so much time, yes, I am, and I'm writing down origins of English just to make sure that I check to make sure that they're on that test, because I'm going to go over that tonight. So origins of the English language, really what I need for you to know is exactly what we learned about when we did that lesson. We did I don't know, a day and a half that we spent. We watched the video, remember the YouTube video on the origins of the English language. Specifically, there was a focus on how our language that we speak, English, it has a history. It started out as Old Norse or an old Germanic language. It then became Old English, which still looks a lot like German. And then the Normans came in, right? You remember the Normans were from Normandy, that is on the northwest coast of France. And so the French invaded in a very important year, 1066. That was the Battle of Hastings. You didn't have to memorize the name of the Battle of Hastings, but you should know that William the Conqueror, that's one of your vocab terms. He came in with his French invaders and defeated Harold, who was the king of the Angles at the time. So he was basically the king of England at that time. And William came in and the Normans conquered England. And so they brought with them the French language, French culture, French tradition. And so that's when the French influence began in not only English culture, but also in the English language as well. That's why, and I don't know if we ever got a chance to talk about this in class, but that's why, the nobility in England, they were mostly French speaking. And still today, if you are of high status, high class, in England, you're going to learn French. That's kind of expected of people who live in England who are educated. You're going to speak two languages, and your first is English and your second is going to be French. That starts in 1066 with the Norman conquest of England. you think about, so the word deer, for example, deer, the animal, like Bambi, the deer, comes from an Old English word, deer, deer, that's deer right there. It comes from the Old English deer, which is that's the word for deer, the name of the animal. But in French, the name of that same animal is Benisson. So Benisson is the French word for deer. Today, if you are talking about the live animal, you talk about a deer. We use the Old English root for that word because those were the hunters. The hunters, the workers, the people who would serve the king, they were English peasants. And so they spoke the old Germanic language. By the time that deer meat was on the plate, the nobles, the French nobles, were eating venison. They would use the French word for deer. It's the same thing for the English word for the animal that goes moo is cow, right? Cow or cattle both come, cow for sure. I'm not sure about cattle, but cow for sure comes from the Old English language. So cow is the animal that is out in the field. When it is on the plate, that's the Old English word. When it's on the plate, you have the French word beef, beef, which of course we call beef today, right? That's the English word is beef. But you see again where the word that is used for the animal, the living animal, has the Old English origin, whereas the word that is the animal as served on the plate would be the French version. So that's just one example of how, like the video we watched, a hearty welcome. The word hearty comes from the Old English. So you think of a hearty welcome, like, oh, come in, give me a big hug. And it's very informal. It's very loving. It's very casual. But a cordial, if I were to give you a cordial invitation, then you would expect that this event is going to have wine and cheese and fancy music, and because the word cordial comes from the French, right? So a hearty welcome, or something like that. That's more like salt of the earth, common man kind of thing. Whereas a cordial reception, the words cordial and reception are both have Latin roots, French roots. That you think of as more of a highbrow event. Watch that YouTube video again. If you just go back to MrIppolito.com, and you'll see that YouTube video that I embedded on the origin of the English language. Okay, I think I've spoken enough about that. So, Catherine, I hope that answers your question. How much of the geography will we need to know? Catherine asks that next question. And I will say, no, at the very least, you should know the map that is on the bottom of the back of the Vikings worksheet. So if you remember that Vikings worksheet, this is what you need right here. And I should probably share my screen with you again. I'm doing a lot of screen sharing tonight. Okay, so this is the map that you need to know. There we go. And so you should know where all of these are. Now, it is just dawning on me. I'm just coming to the realization right now that I may have not yet given this back to you. So if I did not yet give this back to you, then I think it's on my desk. So here's what I will do out of fairness to you. I'm still holding you responsible for this knowledge, but what I should do is I should probably give you about 10 or 15 minutes or so at the beginning of the period after handing this back to you to review it one more time, just so that you have this map. If you filled in this map as you should have, then I think it's only fair for me to give this back to you, so that you have it with you, so that you can at least study from before you begin the exam. I think that's reasonable. I think that's fair. And so that's what I plan to do. So really good. I'm glad you asked that question, Catherine, because I feel like that's important to mention. Okay. I am in a group chat right now, and there is a lot of activity back and forth. So I'm going to mute that conversation. Sometimes you just got to mute a group chat. Otherwise, you just get overwhelmed. All right. Iman asks, what are the origins of the English language? And I think I already answered that for you, Iman. So there you go. Bubbles, I'm not sure who you are, but you said, what is Charles the Conqueror's other name? Charles the Conqueror does not have, I think you're mixing up two different people. So two different people you need to know about. There's Charles the Great, that's Charlemagne. Charlemagne, Charles the Great, is the first king or first emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. So Charlemagne is going to be the first king to unify after the fall of the Roman Empire in the late 400s. Charlemagne in the year 800 is going to be crowned by the Pope as the king of the Holy Roman Empire. And so he's going to unify much of Western Europe. So that's Charlemagne. And then the Conqueror is actually William the Conqueror. And Charlemagne was French. That's where he gets his name from. Charles Le Main, or Le Main, is Charles the Great in French, right? Charlemagne. William the Conqueror is another French guy. He's going to come around 266 years later and conquer England. So they're both French, but they're two different people. Charlemagne in the year 800 and William the Conqueror in the year 1066. And to be honest, I'm probably going to ask you more about William the Conqueror than I would about Charlemagne. Yeah. So expect at least a couple of questions on William the Conqueror for sure. Zaid asks, what are some of the things that knights were expected to follow according to chivalry? So knights were expected to be respectful in battle. They were expected to keep their armor clean. They were expected to be respectful to women. I know that in some place there was something where I don't remember if it's the textbook. It's been a while since I've read this, but I think it was in the textbook, the expectation for what you needed in order to be a good knight, what the rules of chivalry were, because it's similar to the Bushido code, right? There was the Bushido code that was expected of the samurai, and then there was the code of chivalry that was expected of European knights. If someone can look that up for me, I would appreciate it. Someone said, is the audio off? Oh, no. Okay. Someone had made a comment saying the audio was off, and I just listened to myself. So Zaid, the audio is working. Just you may need to check your audio. Okay. Thank you to Ethan and Eric and Bubbles who were helping Ethan out. I don't hear myself in the chat because there's a little bit of a delay. So thank you for helping each other out on that. Iman asks, are you going to have a map on the test? And if I am going to have a map on the test, yes, I would have the map that I just showed you, Iman, that I just talked about just a couple minutes ago. The one that's on the bottom of the back of the Vikings handout that I think I may still have yours. So I'm going to hand those back before you have an opportunity to take the test. Ethan asks, what is a fealty and autonomy? Fealty is feudal loyalty. That's all it is. It's being loyal to your lord, loyal to the next person up. So peasants and serfs are loyal to their knight or to the landowner that upon whose land they reside. Knights are loyal to the lord. The lord is loyal to the king. Lords and nobles are noble, or they have fealty to the king. And then the king's loyalty, of course, is to God, and to God alone is what they believed. Autonomy is just being able to make decisions for yourself. I'm not sure where I know autonomy was in something that we read, but clearly, if I can't think of it and I can't speak to it that much, then autonomy is probably not going to be as important as some of those other vocabulary terms, if that helps you. Zaid says, guys, those are on the Quizlet that I made. So I did share Zaid's Zaid's Quizlet that he made. I shared that this morning in Google Classroom. So check out Google Classroom. Thank you, Zaid, for making that Quizlet. And again, I'm going to just give you the disclaimer. Zaid is a wonderful person and a very smart young man. I have not checked that Quizlet, so I can't check for sure. I kind of looked over it. It looked good. But ultimately, here's what I think you should do. I think what you should do is, if you're using Zaid's Quizlet, and if you have the time to do it, go ahead and make a copy. There's a little button that has the two documents, one on top of the other, and I think it's duplicate or edit or something. You want to click that, and I would say you make it your own. In other words, come up with your own definitions for these terms, because if you make it your own, you're more likely to be more successful. Because you want to know. You don't just want to repeat. If you Wikipedia a vocabulary term, but you don't understand it, then I'm not going to be giving Wikipedia definitions on the exam. I'm going to give the definition that I have talked to you about, that we've talked about in class, that we've been discussing, that we've been sharing. And so just to look up some definition on dictionary.com or to Google it, it's not going to be as effective as like actually doing the research and learning about it and understanding exactly what it means. But thank you very much to Zaid for creating that Quizlet. Okay, thank you, Zaid. A lot of thanks to Zaid. Eric, have fun in your swim class. Why was William the Conqueror a big deal? So Bubbles, I think I already talked about this, but I'll just mention it again quickly, just in case you're joining us a little bit afterward. William the Conqueror is a big deal because he changed English culture and English language. England was England. England was the land of the Angles, the Saxons, the Jutes, and the Celts. These are all Germanic tribes that spoke, that had a common language origin, Old Norse, Old Germanic, right? So they're speaking like old Viking languages, basically, up until the time of, and so that's Old English. That's our original language that English speakers used to speak before the Norman invasion. 1066 Battle of Hastings, William the Conqueror changes all that because he is French. He conquers. When I say the Norman invasion, I only say that because William the Conqueror was from Normandy. Normandy is a region on the northwest coast of France. He invaded. His Normans invaded. It wasn't just him by himself. His Norman army invaded. And the French basically took over the English crown. And England ever since has been a blend of English and French culture, English and French language. The English that we speak today is a blend of English and Old French, which today make up the modern English that we speak today. Okay. Oh, Bubbles, that's you, Matthew. Hello, Matthew. Okay. Ben says, when are you going to grade the group quiz that we took? Oh, the group quiz ended up being just a practice quiz for you. I've decided not to put it in the grade. So Ben, if that disappoints you, then I apologize. Oh, Caitlin asks, will you take our notes? But then you said, never mind. Caitlin, that is actually a really good question. And I will take your notes at the end of the period tomorrow. I will take your notes. So I haven't yet decided on a point value for the notes. But just to make it clear for everybody, if you are collecting your notes, if you're gathering them all up, and again, look at that table of contents, and let me be specific when I share with you. This is what I'm looking for here. I'm going to share my screen again. So this is what I'm looking for. I am looking for, forget about the feudal Japan. We're not covering that. Do I want land for loyalty? Let me look at this to see. Nope, this is all on Japanese feudalism. So here's what you need. I'll zoom in on this so we're very, very clear. This is what you need to study. These are the notes that I'm going to collect from you if you want to share them. You start off with number 7, chapter 14, 1 reading and notes, and it's going to go all the way to number 19. So all of these items right here from 7 to 19, this is what I would be checking. Now, if you're going through your notes and you're like, oh my goodness, Mr. Ippolito, I'm missing one. Therefore, I will not turn in any notes and I feel horrible. Don't feel horrible. Don't beat yourself up about it. If you have most of them, then there's still a strong likelihood that you would get full credit, right? For example, I think the 14.3 reading and notes, I don't know how long that's been in the table of contents. I know we talked about it, but I don't know if I think I put it in the table of contents later. So if you don't have 14.3, that's not the end of the world. But as long as you have most of these items, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So I'm looking for 12 handouts. If you have somewhere between 10 and 12, and of course I still need to give out the Vikings study guide back to you at the beginning of the period tomorrow. So as long as you have most of those, then you're going to be good. You'll be okay. So just know that just that's what you're going to be turning into me. Okay. Caitlin, I feel like I have successfully answered your question, I think. So I'm going to bring it back here to my face. Matthew, you asked, will you take the unit exam? Will you take the unit exam? I'm writing the unit exam, so I'm not sure if I understand your question. If you take notes on this live stream, will you take them? Oh, you take notes on the live stream? Sure. Yes, that would be awesome. Caitlin, I love that. Not required, but hey, if you want to take notes on the live stream, go for it. Ethan asks, what is common law on the wrap-up? All right, so I think you're talking about the number 18 on the table of contents, which is the Medieval Europe Chapter 15 wrap-up. And common law. Oh, okay. So this is from question number 3. And question number 3, and let me just go ahead. I'll do a little screen share again so that you can see what we're doing. Screen share. There we go. Okay. So question number 3, you were asking about, Ethan. Talk to me about common law and habeas corpus. Why are these things so important, even here in the United States today? And why do we italicize habeas corpus? Common law, we really didn't talk much about in class. Common law is just, you know what, I'm not even going to explain it because I'm not going to ask you about it. It's a little bit more complicated, and if I had time, I would, but I'm noticing it's 6:36 and 6:37. We have 23 minutes left. Let me focus on habeas corpus, because that's really what I want to talk to you about, is habeas corpus right here. We talked about it yesterday. I'm gonna review it today. Habeas corpus is Latin for present the body. It is a legal principle that has been around since the time of Magna Carta. You do need to know Magna Carta. Magna Carta is important. Here's why. Prior to Magna Carta, kings could pretty much do, kings of England, we're talking about English history specifically here, English kings could pretty much do whatever they wanted to. And most of the time, English kings did not abuse their power. But eventually, let me go back so that you can see my face, because this is important stuff here. Habeas corpus came about, the concept was really solidified and strengthened under Magna Carta. As we learned yesterday, King John, younger brother of King Richard the Lionhearted, who had gone off to fight in a crusade. The king is gone, so his younger brother, King John, takes over. Remember, that's the same Prince John from Robin Hood, if you watch the Disney movie, King John. In the Disney movie, Prince John, King John, is abusing his power, is overtaxing his people, is being mean and cruel, and is disliked. That's pretty much, not all Disney movies based on history are accurate. Pocahontas is horribly inaccurate, but Robin Hood is actually accurate in that the people of England really did dislike King John. And more specifically, the nobles disliked King John, mainly because they felt that he was taxing them unnecessarily, that he was spending money on unnecessary wars, that he was abusing his power as king. Now, that says a lot, because again, if you remember, in this system, who does the king get his power from? He gets his power, his authority, his right to rule from God. And so a king has to be really, really bad for the people who believe very strongly in God and believe that, God makes good decisions, to say, oh, maybe God messed up on this one because King John is horrible. Now, they didn't actually remove King John from power, but they did force him to sit down on the fields of Runnymede, England in the year 1215, and to sign this great charter. In Latin, it is Magna Carta. That's what it means in English, Great Charter. So it is this agreement between the nobles and the king that the king is going to abide by certain rules. First of all, he is going to honor the right to a trial by jury. So if someone is accused of a crime, they are going to get a jury of their peers. They are not simply going to be put before a judge, or a decision is going to be made by the king or some other ruler. They're actually going to get what we refer to today as due process, right? And actually, if you take a look, part of the reason why we study Magna Carta in 7th grade is because it influences American history. So it influences our system of government. Today, if you look at the Bill of Rights, in the 6th Amendment to the Constitution, it guarantees our right to a trial by jury. we can thank the nobles of England in the year 1215 for passing that down 500. I'm so excited. The desk is shaking. 570 years later, 570-ish years later, after Magna Carta, our founders, James Madison and George Mason, the people who were writing the Bill of Rights, said, you know what? That's important. The right to trial by jury is important. We need to include that in our the United States Bill of Rights. So thank you, Magna Carta, for passing that on to us. Another important part of Magna Carta, and again, I'm still answering that same question that we were talking about, is it's this idea that it's the notion of habeas corpus. In other words, if someone is put in jail for a crime that they are accused of, they can't just sit in jail indefinitely. They need to go before a judge. They need to get their due process. The wheels of justice need to start turning for them. In dictatorships, still around the world today, you could be put in jail and never be told what crime you're being accused of, and never know when you're going to see your family again. That's what happens with autocrats and dictators and tyrants, is those governments throw people in jail indefinitely without probable cause, without due process, without a trial by jury. They just get thrown in jail, and who knows when they're going to have their time in court. In England, it was very important to those nobles to make sure that when King John signed that document, that one of the things that he was including, one of the protections, was this right of habeas corpus. It means that when a family member or loved one goes to the jail and says, present the body, habeas corpus, where's my loved one? And they either need to say, oh, okay, well, here they are, they're safe, they're sound, they're fine, that we're going to be starting the trial soon, or they're dead. They've died in jail, and here's the body so you can give them a proper Christian burial. So again, that Latin term habeas corpus means present the body. How we interpret it today under United States law is police officers in general have 48 hours to present. If you are accused of a crime and you are arrested and detained and put in jail, police, law enforcement, the district attorney, they have 48 hours to formally charge you with the crime and give you the opportunity to go before a judge to enter a plea of guilty or not guilty. And if they can't, then they have to release you. So those are your habeas corpus rights today. Those still stand today. And again, we can thank the nobles, the barons of the year 1215 in England, who fought for those rights, because at the time they were only thinking of themselves. We'll be honest, they were being selfish. They weren't necessarily thinking, hey, we're going to give rights to regular, ordinary citizens all over the world. But really, that's kind of what they ended up doing, because Magna Carta inspired the English Bill of Rights in the 1600s and the United States Bill of Rights in the late 1700s. And it has inspired bills of rights ever since then, with newly created republics and democracies all over the world. So thank you, Magna Carta, and thank you to those barons of the 13th century in England for doing that. Okay. Oh, wow. Alrighty. 17 minutes left, and I'm going to go back. Okay, so Ethan asked, what is common law? And I answer that question. Catherine asks, will we have to know the origins of Monday through Sunday? I asked you about it. That was on the origins of the English language. So maybe. I'm not going to say no, Catherine. Matthew says study guide. Sorry, I forgot to put that. Okay. Catherine says, will we need to have the rules of St. Benedict memorized? Here's what I will tell you on the rules of St. Benedict. The rules of St. Benedict will appear on your exam tomorrow. Guaranteed they're going to be on there. Not all 72. But I did say, I made it very clear that you need to understand what all 72 mean. We spent a day and a half, 2 days in class going over the rules of St. Benedict. So you should understand what they all mean. So, Catherine, you don't need to memorize the rules. But if I ask you one of the rules, then you should know what it means. Ethan says there are 72 of them, Mr. Polito. That's a lot. Do we need to know some of them? Yeah, you need to know what they all mean. Because again, and I'll do a little screen share for you. Right, share. All right. So let's go to mrfleeter.com and we'll go to the rules of St. Benedict. And Oh, where's... Oh, the list. All right. I'm going to show you, because I didn't include it in the table of contents. So I'm going to show you, if I type in Saint Benedict in my search here, then bum, bum, bum. Here's a complete reading on the rules of Saint Benedict. Did I put it here? No. Mr. Ippolito, you should be able to find the handout that you... Because it was a digital... There we go. Click here for the reading. Okay, these are the rules of St. Benedict. There they are right there. So these are all of the rules of St. Benedict that I expect you to know. So for example, if I ask you, like, what does number 26 mean? What does it mean not to forsake charity? You should know what that means. By the way, I'll write that down, number 26. By the way, that means, like, give to charity. If somebody, if the poor, or somebody who's helping out a charity, somebody who's helping other people, if they say, hey, can you donate, a little bit, what you have, then don't forsake charity. Like, give to charity. Number 25, not to make a feigned peace. That means if you're fighting with someone, you're having an argument or a disagreement with them, and then you're like, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. But you don't mean it. That is a feigned peace. You're faking peace. You're not really at peace with them. You're just faking it. So number 25, do not make a feigned peace. And then finally, number 29, I'll talk about that. And I am writing these down because if we talk about them in the study review session here, the YouTube Live, then it's more likely that they might appear on the exam. Not to render evil for evil. What does that mean? That means that you've heard the golden rule: do unto others that which you would have done unto you, or something like that, right? So this is kind of related to that. Don't just because somebody does something bad to you doesn't mean you should do something bad back to them. Do not render evil for evil. Don't two wrongs don't make a right. That's what I'm trying to think of. Two wrongs don't make a right. That is, do not render evil for evil. Hello, hey, welcome back. Yeah, I think it's reasonable to know, because we went over all of them, right? Well, like in class, I said we went through section by section. We spent a great deal of time. So I do expect you to know what all of these are. Okay, and so Ethan asks, Christendom is the worldwide body of Christians, right? I'm not exactly sure. Yes. So when I use the word Christendom, and when you read the word Christendom in the textbook, it simply means the community of all Christians. Specifically, Christianity is, at this time, the majority of the world's Christians are in Europe. There are Christians who are living in and around the Holy Land. There are Christians that are in that part of Western Asia, Christians living in Syria, Christians living in Lebanon, Christians living there, as they do today. However, the majority of the world's Christians, Christendom, Christianity, really was, even though it was founded in and around Jerusalem, it really flourished in Europe. And so at that time, most of the world's Christians, the majority of the world's Christians, vast majority of world's Christians were located in Europe. Today, of course, Christendom is, we don't necessarily use the word Christendom today, just because Christianity is not as unified in the year 2019 as it was back in the Middle Ages. In medieval Europe, there was, like I said, there were the Eastern Orthodox Christians that I talked about in Greece and Russia, and like Turkey, that area, a little bit in there. But most of Christianity was centered in Western Europe, and they were led by one ruler, the Pope. They followed one set of rules that were the rules for the Roman Catholic Church. So Christendom was really much more of an institution back at the time of in medieval Europe, because everybody was walking lockstep. Everybody kind of agreed to the same set of rules. And of course, today, you look at Christians today here in the United States, they disagree over any number of things, religious matters, and They will argue over interpretations of the Bible, and they will argue over the intersection of politics and religion. Christians today worldwide are very different. There are Christians in Africa and Christians in Europe and Christians in Asia and Christians in North America and South America. And it's very hard today to nail down like the one type of Christian today. Back in the time of medieval Europe, it was much easier because it was much more simplified. Everybody was kind of doing the same thing, following the same set of rules, same set of beliefs. So that is Christendom. All right. How did the Crusades affect the history of the world? So Ethan, I will repeat what I mentioned earlier. I'm not going to have a whole lot. We really didn't talk much about the Crusades, so I'm really not going to give much focus to the Crusades on the exam, but I will tell you this, and this is important. So the Crusades were the first time for many Europeans. Listen to this. If you're watching this, listen carefully because this is good stuff. Christianity. The Crusades. Yeah, and its effect. I'm writing this down. Okay. Listen carefully. Like I said before, most Christians in medieval Europe didn't venture more than 3, 4, 5 miles from their home in their whole lives. Most Christians didn't travel. Most Christians stayed close to home. Most Christians only knew their farmland. If you're a peasant, your farmland. If you're a knight or a kind of a smaller landowner, you maybe know your 100 acres, your 1,000 acres, your square mile or 5 square miles or whatever. If you're a lord, you maybe know a little bit more. And if you're a king, some kings would travel, right, from travel around their kingdom. Many kings, I don't think, did. But for the majority of people living in Europe, for most Christians living in Europe, they never got out of a 3 to 5 mile radius from their home because they never needed to. In the Crusades, they travel thousands of miles from their home. They travel from England, from France, from what is today Germany and Spain and all over. And they travel by land, they travel by sea, they travel across the Mediterranean, they travel over trade routes that only very few people have ever traveled. They saw things in the Holy Land that they had never seen before. They experienced spices that they had never tasted before. They experienced things like silk, which came from China, that they had never experienced before. And so all of a sudden, they're like, wow, because food in medieval Europe was disgusting. It was awful. It was often rancid. Meat was often spoiled. You could use salt to preserve it, to cure it, but most food in medieval Europe was pretty disgusting. It was not very flavorful, and it was not very palatable. But that's your source of food, so you ate it. Once they experienced the spices, Europeans were experiencing pepper for the first time. Pepper today, you go, in your kitchen, you have pepper. In restaurants, you get pepper. You can go to fast food places and you can get a pepper packet for free. I'm not advocating that you should go steal pepper, but that today pepper is so common in our culture that people literally, restaurants give it away for free. If you go to a restaurant and you see the salt and pepper shakers on your table, you can shake as much pepper as you want on your food and nobody is going to challenge you. That's how common it is today in our culture. But back then, pepper was like amazing. It blew people's minds. Cinnamon, which today, is in so many baked goods. You put it on your oatmeal. Cinnamon is a very common spice that we have today. Europeans had never experienced cinnamon. They experienced that for the first time. Red peppers, green peppers, cayenne pepper, cardamom, like all of these different spices that today we just take for granted. Today you can go to the grocery store and you can get these seasonings, these spices. Some of them are a little bit more expensive than others. Um, uh, Saffron, for example, is a spice that is very expensive. But pepper's cheap and cinnamon is cheap. And like all these spices that we take for granted today, Europeans were discovering for the very first time. The reason why, Mr. Polito, why do you keep talking about food? Are you hungry? Yes, I am. But more importantly than that, for the very first time ever, Europeans are discovering that there's a lot of cool stuff in Asia. Asia's a cool place. They have cool things that we don't have. And the Crusades open up their eyes to all of these things. And so after the Crusades are over, they finish, 12, 1300s. Europeans are like, well, gosh, we experience a lot of cool things from Asia. How do we get back there? And that's when these trade routes start to open up. Marco Polo, who is someone that we read about very, very briefly, Marco Polo is one of the early traders, traveled along trade routes from Italy to China and back. As more and more Europeans discover goods and spices and really cool stuff from Asia, they're going to want more and more of that. And so more and more of these trade routes start to open up with Asia. Again, you're thinking, Mr. Ippolito, where's the connection between the Crusades and the rest of history? The Crusades turned Europeans on to the idea of getting cool stuff from Asia, and they wanted it more and more. And finally, by the 1400s, they wanted it so bad because it was super expensive. It was dangerous. It was treacherous to go overland from Europe, from Western Europe into Eastern Europe, across mountains, either through the Mediterranean or through the Holy Land, and then across overland to China or to India, where you're getting these silks and spices from. And so finally, somebody in the 1400s says, you know what? What if we just cut out all those middlemen? These Italian traders, these Venetian, most of them are from Venice. If you're from Venice, you are Venetian. These Venetian traders, they would buy stuff from Asia and they would sell it at a markup, right? They would sell it at an increased price. So every time these goods came from Asia and passed from one person to another person to another person, you have a middleman, and then finally it gets to you. It's super expensive and it takes a long time and it's really expensive to get. So somebody said, you know what? What if instead of going east, what if instead of going overland or across the Mediterranean and spending all this money and all these different people who, and it's dangerous and there are bandits along the way that could steal your stuff. And so that increases the price of these goods. What if we just go the other way? What if we just went west? What if we got in boats and we sailed west? I think we could get to Asia that way. And let's try it. And so actually a little bit before that, I'm sorry, let me back up. A little bit before that, they said, what if we got in boats and went around Africa? If we sailed down, and I'm going to illustrate this with a map. Okay, so, oh, wait, hold on. Let me click share again. Okay, so let me go to maps.google.com. All right, and we're going to zoom out. Okay, let's get out of Canyon Country and out of Santa Clarita, and let's go to the world. Ah, there we go. Okay, so I did Google Maps. Okay, so they're like, hey, what if we got in ships rather, because it's super dangerous and super expensive and super slow to go across the Mediterranean and get stuff, because again, China and India are all the way over here. So if you want silks and spices and all this cool stuff from India, or better still, if you want it from, because a lot of the pepper and a lot of the spices are actually coming from these islands here. These are the islands like off the coast of Southeast Asia. This is where you would get a lot of those spices right here in what are today are countries like the Philippines and Indonesia. So gosh, what if we could just find a different way? And it's not necessarily faster, but it's easier if you just get in a boat. Let's say you're leaving from France. You get in a boat, sail all the way around. This is the Cape of Good Hope right here. You go all the way around because there were a lot of storms, and they're like, oh, I hope that you make it. So that's why it's called the Cape of Good Hope. You go around the Cape of Good Hope here, and then you go this way. So the earliest explorers, we haven't even learned about exploration yet, but the earliest explorers were going that way. They were taking an all water route around Africa. Some of them were just stopping here on the coast of West Africa and trading here, but some of them would eventually go all the way around and go to India or go to these islands right here. So if they were close to India, again, this is just the way that geography worked back then, the knowledge of geography. They called these islands the Indies, right? So if they were near India, they would just call all of Sri Lanka, all of these islands, they were just called the Indies, or sometimes called the East, eventually called the East Indies. I'll tell you why that's important in a moment. But then this other guy, Christopher Columbus, says, what if instead of going around this way, what if we went around this way? Because surely if we travel west, then it won't be very long, and then we'll hit the Indies. Well, he totally underestimated. He horribly underestimated the circumference of the Earth, because he thought that it would be faster and easier instead of going this way, blub, 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 around here. He thought that if you just go this way, boom, you'll hit the Indies. And so he, boom, hit right here, and he landed in specifically on the island of Hispaniola right here, which is today the Dominican Republic and Haiti. He landed here on this island, and he's like, hey, he sailed from Spain. He's like, hey, I found it. I found the Indies. And he was so convinced that he found the Indies that he called the people that he encountered the Indians. That's why still today, incorrectly, Native Americans are referred to as Indians. So if you're asking the question, because it was asked a while ago, how did the Crusades affect the history of the world? Ethan, that's how. Because the Crusaders got a taste of Asia, and they're like, this is awesome, we want more. And so they started going around this way, or they started going this way, and then eventually they went around this way, and then eventually they're like, what if we went this way? And so that's when Columbus, who didn't even realize that he landed in a whole new land, he thought he was in Asia. And still to the day he died, he was convinced that this was Asia. Wrong. But other people are like, hey, his calculations were wrong, but he's onto something here. And so other people started traveling over here too, and then they discovered what is called the New World. And that's how the New World was discovered by Europeans. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop screen sharing. It is 7:02. I'm just going to wrap up these questions really quickly. You've been very patient because I talked a lot about that, but I'm excited about that. Matthew asks, what's up with the Norman Conquest? Matthew, go back in time and I talked about it already. Rahim, hello, Rahim. He says, for the exam, there's going to be a paragraph question. I don't plan to have that at this time. It's going to be all multiple choice right now. Rahim asks, is there going to be a paragraph question on the exam? You asked that before. Same answer. Rahim asks, is there going to be a paragraph answer? You answered that, asked that 3 times. Rahim, I'm going to say again, my plan right now is to just have multiple choice only. Ethan says, Mr. Ippolito, I get it. Thanks for your time. Got to go. GTG. And Ethan, hello, goodbye. And Ethan says, see you, everybody. Mr. Ippolito, I got to go. Have a nice one. Bye, everyone, even though I came for 20 minutes. Well, hey, we're happy to have you for whatever time we're able to have you. Okay, and now I have gotten now to the end of the chat. I am now at the bottom where 7:03 Ava says, bye, Rahim. And so there we go. And we had an hour. I told you it was going to be an hour. It's an hour and 3 minutes, hour and 4 minutes now. You asked some great questions. I hope that was helpful. Again, I will say right now what I said at the very beginning, go over your notes. That would be the first thing that I would go over, and then go over the textbook reading. I would avoid trying to do Google searches for stuff and Wikipedia searches for stuff. I think that gives you too much. That's more information than you need. Best thing to do is go over all your notes first, and then review the textbook next. And I think that's the best way for you to review for our exam tomorrow. All right. Well, folks, I'm going to go ahead and say thank you to everybody who participated in the live chat today. Thank you so much. And thank you for all your great questions. And I look forward to seeing you. If you need anything else, you can come see me tomorrow. I won't answer questions at brunch. I won't answer content questions at brunch. If you want to come see me before school, I will answer some additional content questions before school. But brunch is going to be really close. I think tomorrow's a B4 day, I'm pretty sure. So brunch is right before class starts. So I will not answer any content-related questions, no history-related questions at brunch or at the start of class. So you got to take care of all of that in advance. So I'm glad. I'm hoping that was helpful. And I am now going to sign off and say good luck, happy studying. Don't stay up too late tonight. Get plenty of sleep tonight. And I will see you tomorrow morning after brunch in Mr. Ippolito's history class. Thanks so much. Have a great evening. Take care. I'll see you. Bye-bye.